Hello and good evening to everyone. Welcome to our fourth meeting for the series Perspectives on Rhythm, organized by Konnakkol Italia and the Fondazione Luigi Tronci. And today we are with a great flutist and composer from the United States, but actually living in the Netherlands, Ned McGowan, which is an honor to have here. And I thank him for accepting my invitation. Ned holds a diploma in flute and is also a composer specialized in the contemporary classical music. And he's an in-depth connoisseur of rhythm and time in music, which is the focus of his research since lots of years, we can say. And he also is actually done a PhD about something related to these topics and neuroscience that would be very nice to talk about. And he's also a student, a lifetime student of Carnatic classical music and Konnakkol, and organizes every year a wonderful course, which is the International Rhythm course. And so I will start just asking you how this interest in rhythm and time in music came in existence in your musical life.
Yeah, thanks, Omar. Thanks for having me here on your show. It's really nice to talk to you and have a chance to dive into some rhythmic topics. Yeah, it's a really good question. Like, when did rhythm start in my life? And I think it goes back to when I was maybe 11 years old, and my very first flute teacher, he had this old machine called the Tap Master. And I'm sure nobody knows what it is, but it was this big old hunkin' machine, and you would put a cassette in it, and the cassette would have some rhythmic part, and then it would be a metronome, ding, 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 something, and then you would have to tap the button according to these written rhythm exercises, and then the machine would know if you were right or wrong based on some codes on the tape or something. And so it was kind of a game, and I used to play that with my teacher, and I guess I was pretty good at it, and it kind of taught me to really pay attention to rhythm. And it was also about sight reading rhythm, and subdividing the beat and doing proper rhythms. And so in a way that a seed was planted then. But even though I was a classical musician, I was always interested in jazz, and because my teacher also taught me to improvise, and we studied some basic jazz when I started out. And as growing up in basically the 80s in the States, I was also a big rock and roll fan, and so I was always listening to music with rhythm a lot, and I don't think I really understood how important rhythm was for classical music back then, but certainly in jazz, rock, and pop music. And so, and then I went and became a classical flutist, and went to Arts High School, Interlochen Arts Academy, and then I went to the Cleveland Institute of Music for my bachelor's, and there they had this course, Eurythmics, based on the Dalcroze method of rhythm. And that's where it's all about body movement in rhythm, and you have all these exercises where you go in a circle and you clap, and you find your own inner pulse. Really interesting, taught by David Brown. That was really one of my favorite classes in that study. And
was it related to the Steiner methodology?
Yeah, it had. I think it has some parallels with that, or they between the, I think the Dalcroze was, also largely used, or Eurythmics, it was called. They also used that a lot with children and movement and rhythm. But this was a conservatory level class, so we would use it to, to learn how to do a 5-against-3, quintuplets in groups of 3, and things like that. And back then, those things were hard, but I was also good at them, and I really liked it. I just really enjoyed that stuff. So, and then when I came here to Amsterdam, I met someone who started to teach me a little bit of Carnatic theory, and I got introduced to some Carnatic musicians, and then I started studying their approach to rhythm. And after doing that for a number of years, I started teaching it here at the Conservatory of Amsterdam, and then now I've been teaching it for the last 10 years in the Conservatory of Utrecht. So so it's been kind of a reoccurring theme in my life, and so in a way it made sense for me to kind of go into rhythm more in depth.
Yeah, so there is an aspect also that goes in this beyond the, let's say, physical or mechanical aspect of playing the instrument, is it?
What do you mean?
I mean, there is a kind of awareness which is beyond the fact of playing, just the mental awareness of understanding rhythm and feeling it with the body, as you said before. And this is not necessarily, I mean, related to the fact of playing.
Yes, right, yeah. Well, that's kind of the subject that I've really been learning as a teacher of rhythm, is trying to understand how rhythm works in the body, and so it's a question of mind and body. So there is the intellectual side to rhythm. How does it work? What are the numbers? And then there's the or what are the patterns and the different theoretical aspects to rhythm. And then there's the feeling side to it. So how do we embody rhythm? How can we clap a beat? How can we speak rhythms, play them on our instruments? How does the movements of playing our instruments affect our timing? What's the difference between the way a flute player keeps time and the way a piano player keeps time, right? Or a percussionist.
Yeah.
And for those of us who have listened to a lot of flute players and piano players, they keep time very differently. So that's a subject I've been getting interested in the last few years in relation to my PhD study, and including reading some articles and some books on the neurobiology of the way the brain keeps track of time. And right now I'm reading this really interesting book on dynamic attending theory, which is about the way, because the brain has all kinds of different cycles and speeds. We have all these different brain waves, and there are different speeds in the brain, and then the way that they are synchronizing with outside events. So you have driving events, which are the events taking place outside, like a percussion hitting a beat. And then you have the driven events, which are the events which are inside your brain, and the way those synchronize and coalesce and interact. And I find that really fascinating, and it can help explain some of the effects that I notice in the way we perform rhythm, and the way we listen to rhythm, and the way we synchronize or not synchronize. So I find that really interesting.
Yeah.
And of course, it's neurobiology. It's all really complicated material, not my expertise, but I do my best with it.
Yes, but the fact is that you integrate this with your practice of teaching and playing. And how does this happen? I mean, how can you put this knowledge of neurobiology, for example, how do you translate this in a practice of study, for example?
Well, yeah, it's a good question. You know, there's so many facets to it, but one of the exercises I do is one of the exercises I love, which we didn't really do in our class that you followed, but I do it in my class when we meet, is tempo 10 exercise. So we put on the metronome at tempo 10, which of course is a beat every 6 seconds, right? So just to give why don't we just put it on and then let's see how that sounds. It's a great thing to experience. Let's see here. So, and it's also the slowest tempo of my metronome. So, I hope that you could hear that and it wasn't filtered out by the program. So, okay, so you have this long length of time, and we do a simple exercise, and you can do this at home, or you can. It's even better to get with a couple friends and do it. And you sit in a circle and you put this on tempo 10, and then just try to clap on the beat. So I would clap on the beat, next person, next beat, next person, next beat, next person, that beat. So, and of course, it's an extremely difficult exercise. And, you know, I spent a semester practicing this because in order to develop the tools to do it right, you really improve your rhythm in a lot of ways. And but to come back to the neurobiology question, the brain can only we have a maximum length of a moment, and that is 3 seconds. So 3 seconds, and this has been measured by scientists in many different experiments, that after the 3 seconds, which is tempo 20, right? That's the slowest tempo, where we can feel a beat. When you go beyond 3 seconds, you know, and this is not, it's not mathematical, it's about 3 seconds, then your brain refreshes itself. And so we cannot feel it as one thing. You know, like if I'm like this tempo, I don't need to subdivide this to keep it steady, right? And so, but if you slow that down at a certain point, you lose that ability to do it. And so this exercise is 6 seconds. So, okay, it's double that. So it's impossible to feel it. So what you have to do then is you have to create a bridge. And so you have to create a subdivision of whatever. It can be 8 or 4 or 12 or 24 or whatever. And then you have to start counting that and then try to come out right. But the difficult thing about this exercise is because the length is so big that even a small little difference in your subdivision speed will create an incorrect beat.
Yeah.
So you should all try this because it's really fun. And you know, if you're ever in a room of students who are very out of control, you put this on and then make people do it, and that it immediately makes you focus. But it also makes you focus on your body, so that it really, then what we learn from that exercise is that the way we keep a track of time is by feeling our body. And so, you know, if I ask you to do this exercise, it's not a mental exercise. I mean, there are mental aspects to it, but your first thing you're going to do is you're going to you're going to feel yourself and then try to feel what this rhythm is. And that explains a lot about the way we keep track of time and the way we perform rhythms and the way we synchronize with each other. So that's one aspect which I've been really fascinated in. And, you know, it's, of course, it's really complicated when you start talking about the brain, and it's hard to know what's right or wrong. But there are a lot of theories out there, and I find it interesting to read what those theories are and see if they make sense with my own experiences.
Yeah. And so it seems to me that the fact is just to have a feeling of the, yeah, let's say time of or rhythm, how you want to call, just inside ourselves, to develop a kind of grid of reference, some reference points to which we can, yeah, keep ourselves.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's all about the synchronization of the body with time.
Yeah. And the fact of practicing this together with other persons helps also develop the idea of ensemble playing, which is one of the most difficult. I mean, even just to keep quarter notes together, because everyone has his own inner tempo, as you said. No. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. You made, that's a really good point, and that's why it's nicer to do this with more people, and not only for to synchronize yourselves, but also because it's a really difficult exercise, and mostly you fail, right? You mostly get it wrong, and so then you have to fail in front of your colleagues or your friends, and of course sometimes you get it exactly right. Maybe the first time you nail it spot on, and then you think, oh, I can do this, and then you start to have expectations. Oh, I can do this. And then the time comes around and you're like, okay, I got to show I can do this. And then you get a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of nervousness. And then what we see is that your speed of time speeds up because of the nerves. And this is, of course, for all of us musicians, we know this. We know this to be true, that when we are nervous, we play faster. The piece that we could only play a certain speed in the practice room, we get on stage and we're a little excited and we play it even faster. Or the tempo, you think this is the right tempo, 106, you get on stage and you put 106 on the metronome and it feels way too slow, right? Maybe you know that as a drummer, right? If you the tempos on and off stage can be really different. So what that teaches us is that there's a direct relationship between our emotions and our speed of time. And then we start to learn how that works for us. You know, well, what happens to me when I get nervous? Oh, I speed up. How much do I speed up? And you know, how does that work? And then we start to, you can use this exercise in a social situation to work on developing your tools to get control of your speed in situations when you are nervous.
Yeah. Yeah, and so this is what I personally find interesting about this is that make me think that kind of like a music is not just playing an instrument, but is a trip, like they say in India, a yatra, nada yatra, like something that you do something that you go and you don't know where and when you will end this, but you will discover yourself. I think this is great. Yeah. And what about the like the tools that you developed is correct for for exploring this relationship with time and rhythm. Does these tools come from the your experience as a musician in classical I think contemporary music maybe, or the study of jazz or rock or carnatic music, or what else?
Yeah, I mean, the rhythm that I teach is a combination of the methodical approach of Carnatic music, right? So the Carnatic musicians, they have, or Indian music in general, they take a very logical approach to rhythm because Indians are great in math and logic, and so it makes sense that they would develop systems where you can look at quintuplets just as easily as you can look at 16th notes. Whereas in the West, we know 16th notes really well, but you throw a quintuplet in front of someone and then they're like, oh, freaking out. And so so that's different than in India. They of course they also use a lot of 16th notes too, but they have systems to be able to look at quintuplets and septuplets and nonuplets and further in a methodical way. And so that's been really a great tool for me to teach the basics of rhythm. Like, how does rhythm work? If I write a 4 against 5, what does that mean? What does the 4 mean? What does the 5 mean? And so by looking at the gatis and the jatis in Carnatic music, or the tuplets and the groupings, then we can start to explain how rhythm works. And this is also something that I've learned in that a lot of professional musicians and masters classical students, they don't know what those things mean, but we're playing them all the time approximately, but we don't really know exactly, well, what does this mean? And so this has been the great thing about Carnatic music, is being able to use that system and the syllable system in order to look at the nuts and the bolts of the way rhythm works. And then once we understand that, we can start looking at what its possibilities are. Once we can sketch all the different possibilities, we can check each one of them out, practice them, and see which ones are really cool, and then we can start to make music with those.
Yeah.
As opposed to the typical Western method, which is that you hear a bunch of music and then you jumble it up and put it together into new ways, but it's all rote. It's all what you've heard before. And if what you've heard is mostly 16th notes and triplets, then your music is also going to be 16th notes and triplets. But if you take a logic, like the way the Indians look at rhythm, and then you apply it to your music, all of a sudden you can come up with incredible new rhythmic possibilities. And so that's why I think that the Indian method is a really great system to look at, to be looking at rhythm, whatever music you play, either European music or African, or so there's all kinds of parallels just with the way rhythm works. Of course, there are other levels to rhythm, like micro timing, and which do change in different cultures. And so it's not the only way to look at rhythm, of course.
Yeah, I find this very interesting, but I think before going in depth into this, there is a question from Dagmar Batman that I show here. How does a singer keep time, neurologically speaking?
Golly. It's of course it's trickier with a singer, because like if I want to count 10 bars as a flute player, I can be playing notes and I can think 1, 2, I can think the words, and I know the word order really well, and then I can count, right? You count with words. But if you're singing lyrics, then you can't, right? Because you have other words. So it's a different ballgame with singers, absolutely. And on the other hand, if you look at the Carnatic singers, they're the main musicians, huh? Right? The singers in Carnatic music, they are the top of the pyramid. Everyone loves the singers the most. And as a matter of fact, I think somebody once told me, and it makes sense to me, that if you say musician to most people in the world, most people think you're talking about a singer.
Yeah.
Because that's the only real instrument. Everything else is a little percussion. It's all kind of imitation stuff.
Yeah.
So, but the Carnatic musicians, the Carnatic singers, they will be keeping the tala, so they're conducting. They'll be directing who's going to play when and where. They'll be singing the composition. They'll be improvising. They will be deciding on the spot what pieces they're going to do. The singers in Carnatic music are these master everything musicians, and so that's different than singers in the West, which are very specialized, and they learn their style to a really high degree, like an opera singer, and they achieve incredible things. But there isn't that sort of multifaceted approach in general. Of course, we have so many great singers in the West too. But looking at the neurology of the way a singer keeps track of time. What can I say about that? I mean, I think that you would have a lot of the same tools of movement, like inner pulse, right? Where do you keep your inner pulse? Is it in your foot? Is it in the center of your body? Is it, do you bob your head or something? There are all these different ways that we can keep track of pulse in the body. And those are just as, they're the same for singers as instrumentalists, I would imagine. And the singer, of course, also has his own challenges of timing, right? So, like, in order to sing a note, you still have to like breathe in, and then you need to set up some pressure, and then you need to open the vocal cord, and then the sound needs to come out. So it does take time, and like a violinist, they can be really fast. They set it up and then go. But if you play trombone, you have to go, it takes a lot of time. So every instrument has its own different speed of articulation, and or its own duration of wind-up time, right? How long does it take you to play a note? So like on flute, maybe 1/3 of a second, I can get some air in and then turn it around and blow a note. But that's going to be different for every instrument. And then we learn how that works for our instruments. And then we learn how to synchronize that with other people who have other timings. But I never heard any theories about the keeping track of time being different in a singer than in an instrumentalist. But by no means have I read everything about that stuff. So I wouldn't say I'm an expert on neuroscience or the neurobiology. It's there are just some stuff that I've read which really connects with my own theories about it.
Yeah. And coming back to our previous topic of Carnatic music, because this is something very interesting also to me. Why and what did you find in the Carnatic system that you could not find in the Western, for example, your Western studies, because you have a great experience as a flutist, as a composer, but it's kind of, I wonder why you had to go so far to find such a a methodic and scientific way of approaching rhythm, while we have developed, for example, a super theory of harmony, of form, great, but why about rhythm there is this kind of of lack, maybe?
I think it comes down to the practicality of the complexities of Carnatic music, right? So, I used to play Ferniho, a piece by him, which I learned, and that literally changed my life in so many ways. And but it was such a different approach to rhythm than the Carnatic method. So, and so the Carnatic music, it has, well, the thing I always say is that, it's because it's a tradition of a couple thousand years old, and that it's just been developing and developing and developing in a practical way. So it's not theoretical.
Yeah.
It's only practical. And so, but through all that development, they've developed an incredible approach to quite some amazing complexities, but in a way that once you understand how it works, you can easily do it.
Yeah, that's astonishing. Seeing
Yeah.
people doing so difficult rhythm. Yeah.
Yeah. And and like most of these videos, like from BC Manjunath and other great percussionists, they sound amazing and they sound really complex, but in all reality, once you understand what they're doing, usually they're not complex at all. It's just a system of numbers, some sequence of numbers, and then a very simple system of variations on those numbers. And once you have to practice it, but once you understand it, it's not complex. And that's the secret of it. It's not complex. It's quite simple, but it's very practical. So they achieve complexity by layers of simplicity. So you take a couple things which are easy and simple, and then you put them on top of each other. You combine them. And then you come up with something which can be quite complex sounding, but, it's really simple. So whereas some of like the new complexity stuff, you have one line, which by itself is very complex. And I mean, that music is also great. It's just a completely different approach to rhythm and time than the Carnatic method. So to answer your question, I just really liked the methodicalness of Carnatic music and how that could be applied to rhythm in general.
Yeah. And it's interesting what you said about complexity and simplicity, because, for example, if we try, I mean, to write in Western notation, even a very simple composition of Konnakkol, or even a Kriti, or what else of Indian music, which has a little bit of rhythmic complexity. It looks like something quite impossible to be read in our notation. I mean, this is strange, no?
Yeah, and it shows how shows what the influence of our notation system has had on the direction of our music. And so the Western notation system, some things it does really well, and other things it does not do well at all. And when you let go of that, and you think about just possibilities of numbers like they do in Carnatic music, then it's quite simple. But when you have to translate that to our notation system, it can get really complicated, and then that can scare people off, or they don't even know it exists because it seems like it's too complex. And so that was another big lesson of Carnatic music, just like improvisation, right? If if you're a free improviser, you know so many amazing possibilities for playing your instrument that are completely foreign to a classical composer. Because to notate the things that you might improvise would be so complex. But to improvise them, it might not be complex at all. It might be quite simple. And so that's another example of the notation system being a real limitation. On the other hand, then our notation system enables these amazing structures. It enables the Rite of Spring or Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, or all these great constructions throughout the music history. Those are made possible because of our notation system. It's just that right now we've, with the availability of recordings from around the world, and now we start to, we can go to YouTube and listen to all kinds of amazing Carnatic pieces and say, well, I want to do that too, right? Or listening to these Konnakkol solos. And so then we start to translate them to our system and see how that works. And sometimes, it can work. But in the end, usually the best approach is to notate it to help you get it clear in your head, and then just play it by memory, as the Carnatic musicians will do.
And these methods that you learn from Carnatic music, you apply also to your practice of musician, as for example a player flute of contemporary music like Ferniat, you said before.
Well, when I was learning the Ferniho, it was the same moment I started learning the Carnatic stuff. So I wasn't. They were two different things at the time, and the Ferniho is so complex that you don't. It's hard to know how you would apply the Carnatic. I mean, because it's just the way he uses the numbers is so different than the way Carnatic musicians use numbers, and so then there's not much overlap. I mean, probably here and there you could find some things. I learned more about Ferniho by talking to Ervin Arditi, the violinist from the Arditi quartets, and the way he would look at different tempos and stuff. And there's some really nice articles about Ferniho from Arditi and Stephen Schick, and also Harry Sparnay, the great Dutch bass clarinet player, also worked with Ferniho, and that I heard some stories from him about his ways of doing it and what Ferniho thought, and that was also really interesting for me. So it's a completely different approach. But what I've been interested in in my own music, is to look at the way they approach rhythm and structure in the Carnatic music, and then figure out some rules of how that works, and then take those rules and then make a tool out of it, and then create a new piece out of that using all my other Western tools of like harmony and instruments and stuff. So that's one thing I've been doing in my music for the 25 years, is looking how I can take the awesome things from Carnatic music and make my music with that.
Yeah.
And usually it doesn't sound Carnatic at all, but if you understand Carnatic music, you can see what's going on there. But I'm just trying to write a piece of music, and I grab some tools from there because I think they're really great.
Yeah. This idea of developing some tools is very, very interesting. And now it comes to my mind an observation that we were talking about the differences of approach in rhythm in our Western system and Carnatic one, and now it came to my mind the observation of Creston about the end of the Rite of Spring, le Sacre du Printemps. When he did the calculations, and it ended up with just I don't remember how many, but in a whole number of 4/4 bars, and yeah, he says, yeah, we can write in 4/4. Why not? It's just more complicated, no? Having 2/16, 3/16, 5/16, 3/8, and this is when I read this for the first time, I thought this is like there is something of the Carnatic approach in this observation. I mean, an Indian musician, for example, the fact that they never changes the tala within the piece, but what changes are the groupings. And it's the same, maybe, observation of Preston. What do you think about?
Well, just listen to any piece by Meshuggah, right? The heavy metal band. Usually, all their pieces are in 4/4, but they certainly don't sound like it. And that's what's so great about them. And yeah, so I mean, this thing about I know that story about the changing the rite of spring into 4/4, and then what is it, that whatever it was, and maybe with some orchestras it helped, and if they did it, I think they did perform it like that with some orchestras, and I think that's more a question about synchronization and the way you think of time, right? And so usually the most important thing about playing together is that you conceive of the time in the same way. So if we're going to say da 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 whatever, and we understand that as being triplets in groups of 4, then we can play it together. But if you want to go, I don't know, if you wanted to create some other subdivision out of it, then we would think of it differently, and then it would make us more difficult for us to synchronize. There seems to be certain psychological tendencies to rush or slow down based on the way the numbers work or the way the movement works of playing your instrument. And if we are all thinking of it in different ways, that creates small differences in the way we play, and that would make it more difficult. Whereas if the whole orchestra was reading it in 4/4 and it just had syncopations, there's no reason why they couldn't play that together. And if you were going to do it the original way, which is 2/16, 3/16, 5/16, whatever, then if the orchestra has the technique to be able to do that, like good orchestras do, then they all think that way, and the conductor is clear, then it just also works fine. The only problem would be is if half the orchestra did it in 4/4 and the other half did it in the mixed meters, then you would have a problem. Also conducting wise.
Yeah. The fact is just I think you know better than me. This is a notational problem, maybe just the fact of the choice of what you think also an orchestra can do, like you said, because Stravinsky he knew very well when, for example, in the Histoire du Soldat he puts a phrase or even in the Sac du Printemps, an even phrase, again some odd phrases, but they come up after some measures, and this is just because maybe he knew that for us to read this is easier.
Well, sure, and I imagine he tried it certain ways and then chose one, and they also had 176 rehearsals for the first performance of Rite of Spring, and now they do 3 rehearsals. So there is a sort of accumulation of technique over the time, and so we can write things now that Stravinsky couldn't write, and also I think rhythm certainly in the last 100 years has been one of music's greatest elements of improvement. Now we've seen more improvement in rhythm than some of the other elements in music. So that's exciting, and that shows that there are a lot of interesting things going on. And the more we are exposed to that stuff, and the more we talk about it, study it, learn it, make pieces with it. If I write a piece that has all these Carnatic rhythms in it and a bunch of high school students are playing it, then they start to learn these nuts and bolts about the way rhythm works in order to play the piece, and then they understand that better. And then we can start to use other notations and other maybe more complicated structures or less complicated structures. Maybe we start composing in 4/4 with really different groupings, because that can give a better effect than the mixed meter. I don't know. It's my own approach is, when I have a complicated rhythm thing, I'll think of 4 or 5 different ways to notate it, and then I'll make the options, and then I'll go through and I'll read it, and I'll kind of make a decision. And theoretic as a practice, I'm not at all trying to notate things in a complicated way. I believe in notating as simply as possible and as practical as possible for the performer. That's very much a golden rule, as opposed to me trying to show how smart I am and make some complicated notation, right? It's easy to write complicated, complex music, but writing complex rhythms that are easy to perform, that's not easy. You have to really know how to think of it and how to notate that in a way that a classical performer, if that's what it is, can understand it. Yeah. So there's a lot of knowledges you have to bring together to make a correct choice.
Yeah. And just to conclude, I would like to ask what you think, just what we were talking at the beginning, the relationship between our perception and also performance of rhythm and our body and our voice also, which is something that is very much involved in Carnatic music performance. And how this can relate to the practice of music in our also Western context.
Sorry, I don't quite understand the question. One more time, please.
What do you think is the relationship between our perception and practice of rhythm and our body and our voice? And how the Carnatic approach to this can help in developing some tools, some easiness to the approaching also Western repertoire?
Well, the perception of rhythm, the perception of time is there are a lot of facets to that. And that's also really interesting to look at, how do we perceive time right now, and how do we perceive time in retrospect? We have prospective time and retrospective time. Those are 2 very different perspectives on time, which have a lot of consequences. And also the way we experience time, like at home or on the stage, how do the different contexts change how we experience time. Those are all really fascinating topics. And why does time fly when you're having fun, or why does time go really slow when you're feeling bad? Those kinds of things. And that's sort of the kind of really obvious examples, but I'm interested in looking at those more subtly, from how they affect music, and the relationship between the density of events and the duration of a piece. So if we have a piece that has 1 minute long and there's 100 things that happen in that piece, it has a certain feeling of length. And if there are 12 things that happen in that 1 minute, it has a very different feeling of length. And I find that really interesting to learn how that works and see what I can do with that as a composer. And then the thing about the Carnatic music, to come back to why that's interesting for us Western musicians, it's basically because of the logic of the system. It's also the logic of our system. It's just that we don't talk about that logic much. And some people know it and most people don't. And so, but the Carnatic system, it's so clear, the logic of the way the rhythm is put together and the numbers, and they have a nice syllable system, takidimi, to be able to learn it and practice it and to talk about it. And so that's been a really good system to learn Western rhythm through that perspective, because it makes it much clearer, and we can judge it better, what's good and bad, and correct or incorrect, and then for those improvisers and composers, it gives us all kinds of tools to do new things.
Yeah. So before saying goodbye, I want to, before everything, thank you, Ned. For sharing all these wonderful experiences with us. And
thanks for your questions.
Say also that Ned is held in just in maybe the next week, the 18th, is it? He's starting a wonderful course about just what we discussed today, Rhythm, with respect also to Carnatic system, and Ned's system of teaching rhythm also. Together with other great musicians like B.C. Manjunath, Dr. Misore Manjunath, one of the greatest violinists and musicians of India, and Christina Fuchs, a wonderful singer. And so this is very interesting for whoever may be interested in studying rhythm and approaching also the Carnatic system. And just even to see how it works, and then finding some tools, as we said today. You can check this out. I will put the link in the comments. And I remember also our streaming of tomorrow with Vidwan Guru Prasanna sir, one of the greatest Kanjira player of South India. And we will be discussing how Kanjira, which is a small frame drum, one of the most important percussion instruments of South India, how this relates to the Konnakkol system, how this interacts with the other musicians on stage, how improvisation works. So this will be very interesting. You can join us tomorrow. And so thank you everyone for being here today, and thank you, Ned.
Thank you, Omar. My pleasure.
Bye everyone. Thank you.